Hello and welcome everyone to Craig and Paul Unscripted. So
hello.
I know, yeah. So might as well be honest. Exciting news for you. We've obviously kept the brand name because it's established now, but we've sacked Dave. We've had enough, quite frankly. And
Craig and Paul just doesn't work, does it? Really?
It doesn't work as a name, but
better.
Yeah, got to be honest with you. It's Paul behind the scenes now, and Dave's. I can't do this. I can't do this.
Hey!
Still can't get that right. He's there.
I can do it easy.
Yeah. We haven't.
I'm back. Dave. You can't get rid of me that easily.
Yeah. As much as maybe I'd like to on the odd occasion. I don't have the power to sack Dave anyway. So.
You might be able to keep the videos down to 20 minutes if Dave wasn't part of it.
This is a very good point. Right. Okay. So what are we faffing about with? We've said before that we always plan to have some guest speakers on the series. So here is one of them. So today's special guest is Paul Long. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Yeah, not part of the Craig and Dave company, part of his completely own organization supplying computer science resources, but we'll get into that in a minute. Now, we've been working with Paul for a little while, and we're going to do 2 videos with Paul. So today we're doing part 1 of 2. So, Paul, start off with a little introduction. Just tell everyone who are you, because you're not part of Craig and Dave, but you know we've known you for years.
Yeah, I know it's been a long time, but we've only been working together for what, about 6 months? No, 8 months, is it? Something like that now. And but yeah, I mean, I was a teacher like you guys, and I taught for many years, head of departments and everything. And I started my business first started in 2005. Would you believe? And it came about because I was just sharing resources, and I suddenly thought, hang on, I'm like sort of giving all this stuff away for free. If I create a business out of this and make a loss, I can probably get some money back from the tax man. I'll put it down as, expenses and so on and so forth. And suddenly I actually started to make some proper money out of it after a couple of years. And I was like, oh, this is quite good, and all of that came about because back in those days, there weren't, just like now, there aren't many computer science teachers around. It's difficult to find them. There weren't many IT teachers around, and so I was one of the few nationally, and I just suddenly found myself having lots of doors open and lots of opportunities, and I started writing exams for OCR. I got invited to do some for them, and I was just going to find a document for you. But you know what it's like when you do something live and the screen doesn't come up the way you want it to do.
Let me share. There you go.
Look at that one. That was my first ever exam that I wrote. September 2003, A-level.
Yeah.
Information communication technology. It wasn't really an exam. It was a coursework that had to be done under controlled conditions. Right,
Paul. Let me just make sure I've got this right. So you've been an examiner, but you also created the actual assessments that students had to complete for their formal qualification.
That's right. Yeah, I did that for the old A-level. Up until about 2011, I think was the last one I did for A-level IT. But I have also done stuff for AQA, GCSE Computer Science, and AQA at technical level 3 as well, and written exams for them. So it's fun. It's a real privilege to do as well.
And let's put this in perspective here. I mean, you've been doing this, as you say, for quite some time. You said your first paper there, 2003. I mean, I don't mean to make you feel old, but do you realise that's our current year 13s?
Yeah,
they were born in the year of your first exam paper.
They were, yeah. And it's like you two were doing the sort of like history of computing, weren't you, the other day, and devices, and I don't think you started paying much attention, did you, Craig, to about 2003? Because, you know, it was... No,
and that's it. I mean, it's worth saying. I mean, when Dave and I, because you know, if you've been watching our series, we did a video on how we got into this, and, you know, people already know it was when the A-level computing specifications changed that Dave and I kind of like were, right, this is going to be hard. And that's where sort of Craig and Dave was born. And we knew of Paul Long. He'd been doing this. You've been doing this. Sorry, talk about you in the third person. You've been doing this long before then. I mean, we knew of Paul Long. Your resources had been around for a while. And it was one of the things like, well, you know, there's other people doing it. Paul Long's doing it. Why can't we do it? So, yeah, you've been at this. You've been at this for some time, and I've used your resources before back in you're doing ICT courses.
The really annoying thing, though, is that you did a better job of it. You know, you came up with the A-level Craig and Dave videos, and you just sort of like got that fame, international fame. You know, I mean, we both sell resources abroad, you know, as well as in the UK. Yeah, but you got that fame and of something that you were doing just to help other people out. Well, you were just doing it to help yourselves out to start with, you know. And
we never expected what's happened. You know?
And you've made a big company out of it. And I was your competitor, you know, for a little bit. And it was like, oh, everybody keeps recommending Craig and Dave. What about me? I'm here. You know, don't forget me.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in due course and explore that a little bit further, because it is interesting, because we are still two rival companies, actually. But, and there's a big but that goes with it. So why don't you tell us what classroom resources you make then, Paul?
Yeah, okay. So at the moment, my main focus is on GCSE computer science. So I produce model answers to the programming projects. And that's going to have to evolve a little bit, because programming projects won't be a compulsory part of the course for the current year 10s in a traditional model. And there's the GCSE Ultimate Resources, which I think we're going to talk about more in the next video. So I won't go into too much detail about those. So that's my main focus. I'm going to be looking at some walking, talking mocks soon. And I also go into schools. So I like to keep my teaching up to date. And what I do is I go and run revision sessions in schools. So on Sunday, not this Sunday yesterday, but Sunday before, I was at a private boarding school. It was fantastic. You know, they had little what do you call them, flannels to dry your hands in the toilets. and it was brilliant being there. And then on Thursday I was at a school in Reading, and you know, and it's great. It's such a privilege to see so many different schools and see how when different people do things. But you know, do you want to show what I've got on my screen at the moment?
Yeah,
I think this is quite funny, because this is how it all started, really.
Wow.
Before
what is that?
Exams. What is that? Yeah, that is a website written in HTML from about 1999, probably. Before we had all web editors and all sorts of things. So this was my school website. And you know, you go, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
It's like, what? All those bubbles in the background. What were you teaching your kids about? You know, appropriate use of images and things like that. But the best part about it was I had these IT resources. So I'm just going to flip to a different screen. So let me just grab this one, because. And I apologise for flipping all over the place, but that's better than scripted. So this was our IT department one. And this was where I used to start getting emails from people saying, oh, wow, thank you. I've been using your resources from your school website. They're really great. And I was like, what? And people from different countries as well. And this is what started making me think, well, you know, if you're using it, you know, then perhaps I can make something of it. And I had the GCSE resources here, and I used to do what were called templates then, before templates were banned by JC.
I remember that. That was a period.
I know. And the lovely thing about it was that you could give the students this template to do, and they knew how to present their evidence. Because one of the biggest problems with the coursework was like making sure they knew what evidence to produce, not how to do the work, but what evidence to produce. And so those are the sort of things I did. And then, I mean, look at that dreadful colour there, pink on yellow background. You know, what was I thinking? But, you know, I had all these A-level resources as well that I produced. And you can see there, you know, this was the very first design template here that I'm just highlighting now, that I did for A2 level. And you can see
A2. We've got about A2s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because most people won't know what an A2 level is, will they?
They won't.
Just second year of A level, because you used to have the qualifications were separate. And look, it showed the students the sort of things they've got to produce and put together. Unfortunately, JCQ didn't like that in the end. They stopped us from doing it, didn't they?
They did indeed. Well, this brings us on something we do want to ask you about. Actually, I think, Dave, you got an opinion on this, haven't you?
Yeah. So this is how I got to know Paul Long. So teaching ICT A level, I was teaching computer science as well, but teaching ICT A level and computer science, two completely separate qualifications. And they had to do, you know, a sort of a major assignment, and it was always database based. And I always felt quite smirk because my students always got a good deal because I'm a database analyst and specialist and programmer by trade. That's what I was doing before I came into teaching. So I was able to create these amazing, you know, access databases with VB code and all the rest of it. No problem at all. But my colleagues, unfortunately, didn't have the same experience that I did in the industry, and they would struggle with trying to get these databases together because at Key Stage 3, you would have created a table, a little query, maybe a form, possibly a report, often using the wizards to make those things. And that was kind of it. And then, of course, you got to A level and suddenly you had to have all these interfaces that were interlinking and more complex queries. And there were some things you probably could do with a query, but it was so convoluted. It was easier to just do it with a very simple little bit of VB. So you'd insert a little bit of VB code. And of course, that would just sort of blow the students and teachers' minds. So I got to know Paul Long because you could buy what were known as similar but different. Do you want to just tell us a bit about those, Paul?
Yeah. So what I did was I because I was writing these exams, and when I was doing them, I thought it would be a good idea to produce something that was similar but different enough that students could learn the skills they needed, because some of the skills, as you say, were quite intricate, and it was impossible to teach, you know, the whole of all the things that you might possibly come across in Microsoft Access for databases. But let's face it, it was Microsoft Access in those days, and you couldn't do that. So you had to focus on the skills that were going to be needed, you know, for the exam. So I produced these similar but different tasks, which would introduce the exam. I mean, you can have a look if you want on my screen at the moment. This is one of them, and you can see here, this is the answer document. And I think this might actually be the real model answers to the task that were for teachers only, because a lot of teachers, and to be fair to them, were coming from other subjects to teach IT.
Yeah.
Never used databases before, and never used spreadsheets, and couldn't answer the tasks themselves. And so they needed that help. And so I would produce the answers. And this is just a Word document that brought it all together. And you can see it wasn't, you know, that this wasn't like a particularly difficult part of the task, doing an if statement. There were much harder ones. They had to do macros. Sometimes there would be even a little bit of VB code, which was like, whoa, you know, this isn't supposed to be computer science. This is supposed to be IT.
I mean, but you're right, Paul. If you're a non-specialist, you come from another subject, and you look at that if statement there, this is not trivial to you. And it's funny how history is now repeating itself now with obviously ICT teachers who didn't train as computing teachers, and some of those have come from other disciplines such as maths and business. It's we've been here before. You've been on this journey twice.
It's full circle, and we will probably go back there again. And you know, am I allowed to swear and say Michael Gove?
No, not really.
That man. Yeah. That man who destroyed the computing curriculum completely. We had some like, IT needed reforming. Nobody disagrees with that. The GCSE IT needed reforming. The A-level IT needed reforming. But the A-level IT wasn't easy by any means at all. It really differentiated students. But he ridiculed it and said it's a bit of word processing and spreadsheets.
I think you're right. And it was completely different. You could legitimately take A-level computer science, which was about the theory of computers and programming, logical thinking, those kinds of things, and combine it quite legitimately with A-level ICT, because that was some really deep level skills, as we were talking about in Access database management systems, but also Excel and spreadsheets, and going quite deeply into formulas and building interfaces for spreadsheets to integrate with each other, with input and output of data from files as well. But also web design and animation and all the skills that actually, it won't be too long before people will be saying, no one knows how to use a spreadsheet anymore.
Exactly what's going to happen, isn't it? It's ridiculous. And, I'm really pleased they promoted the GCSE computer science and sort of like wanted to highlight computer science. And it was always something I wanted to teach at our school, because I taught it when I first started teaching. I taught A-level computer science. But the way they just dumped IT completely and then threw us into this situation, and what was this, 2014, 2012, 2013, wasn't it? 10 years ago. And we're still now in a situation where we haven't got enough computer science teachers. And it's full circle, and people are going to be going into jobs, and it's going to be, what do you mean you don't know how to do a formula in a spreadsheet? Oh, but I can program it. I can write it in Python. Oh, yeah, brilliant. That's great.
What I need, though, is a nice chart making in Excel and then putting it into a PowerPoint so I can show it to the board. Oh, I can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. All these everyday skills are gone, so I'd love to have seen a hybrid qualification, and as Dave said, you could have done the 2 A levels. It's effectively like a double A level, and that was a perfect.
I did have students who did both back in the day, applied ICT and computing for while there was that overlap in the old computing spec, and they would tell me it's nothing at all the same. The only overlap they would get was a bit of ethics. Both courses had morals and ethics, which is fine, and copyright. And both courses had a bit of databases, but not to the same level. And one was a practical application of databases to solve a problem, and one was theoretical. That was it. That was it. It's probably less than an overlap you get between taking biology and chemistry, and that's it. It was totally different.
Absolutely, it's just another science like that.
Yeah.
I've got to return to this similar but different for a minute, though.
Yes.
Because I can't let this go by without a comment from Paul Long. As I understand it, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the exam boards particularly liked you. You kind of went from I'm an examiner and I create the papers to Paul Long, put him at arm's length. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
I don't think they like you very much. You are. Yeah, you did warn me. You did warn me, didn't you? But only at 11 o'clock. Anyway, yes, that's right. I was producing something that helped students and helped teachers. And I think that there were a couple of people back in the day that wanted to catch students out all the time in the way they wrote exams, which isn't right. It's not the way you should do it. Questions should be clear. It should be absolutely clear what a student's got to do. And so I've never been shy in saying what I think. And so I would say that, and I would produce these templates that would help, to structure the answers. It wasn't to show students how to do it, to solve a problem. It's say, this is the evidence you've got to produce. So they knew what evidence to produce. I don't think they liked it. I've never really worked out why. Some people at the end will say, well, it's cheating. And I said, no, it's not cheating. It's just saying, this is what I want, how I want you to prove that you've done it. And so there was a bit of an animosity for quite a while, and it went on for a few years. But we've got Kerridig now at OCR, and of course we've got Tim at EdExcel and Steve Kenny at AQA, and I get on with all of them very well indeed. And Kerridig has done a lot to sort of like put all of that stuff in the past and say, well, actually, you know, we can all work together and we can all do things for the good of each other.
Yeah. We had a very similar experience in the early days of Craig and Dave. We created resources for A-level, and particularly for the A-level project. And we didn't think it was sufficient just to give the students a mark scheme and say, your work needs to conform with the mark scheme. Because in any other subject, and certainly, you know, as part of the pedagogy that your senior leadership team would expect in the classroom, you'd be expected to show model answers. I remember a classic phrase in teaching, which was, show them what good looks like. And I remember being observed in my lessons, and if you didn't show them what good looked like, then your lesson wasn't good enough. You had to provide model answers. So what we did is we took the mark scheme and we said, okay, well, if you were writing up your analysis section, then you might want to structure it a bit like this, and this is what a good analysis would look like. And they didn't like it at all. They said, you can't do that. It's cheating. You can't combine your model answers with your tutorials. It just, you know, it can't work like that. And we backtracked and we kind of took on board everything that they were saying, and we put great big red banners across our resources to say, this is not intended for assessment. This is, you know, strictly for you to learn the materials. You must do something completely different to this for your real assignment, etc., etc. And we did that for quite some time. And then it was only fairly recently that I thought, hang on a minute. They're not in any position to tell us what we can or can't publish. We're an independent company. We publish what we like. But it is important that you have a good relationship with the exam boards and with each other and other publishers, which is why we're having a chat today. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of push and pull with the exam boards. You know, we're all trying to help students, and we're all trying to find ways of letting them evidence their knowledge and success and become successful. You know, the exam boards want that, the teachers want that, the publishers want that. But in amongst that is a little bit of, you know, push and pull, where's the line between helping a student and assessing a student. And anyway.
That's absolutely right. And that's one of the things I always used to give advice on. And actually I used to run training courses for these A-level tasks as well. And teachers who'd come to them, you know, that they were all felt comfortable after them knowing what they could and couldn't say to students. And it was one of the things I would make absolutely clear. You know, it wasn't just about, like, this is a course to show you how to solve a problem. This is a course also to show you how to teach it. You know, it's like that, demonstrate what it looks like. The analysis, you said, you know, I know people who go in to do analysis for big companies, and they get weeks and weeks of training. And our students at A-level and even at GCSE, you know, we're expected to analyze a problem. And we still do the computer science, don't we, at A-level? You know, you analyze this problem, and you've never done anything like that before in your life. You're 16 years old, and it's a really hard skill.
You're right. It is a very hard skill. And if you haven't done it before, it's very, very challenging. I spent one of the modules on my degree course of computer science was analysis. And I spent a whole half a year just doing analytical skills in order to understand how you can understand somebody else's problem and all the nuances. Just when you think you understand their problem, because of the way they've described it to you and they've got a vision in their own mind of what that means, you misinterpret it. And so I spent ages as part of my degree course learning analysis. Yet all of a sudden, like you say, 16, 17-year-olds are suddenly expected to be able to deeply analyze a problem.
No, I know, it was crazy, wasn't it? So I suppose we might get back to these similar but different tasks, haven't we? And I've got a video to show you here. So this is one of them. So shall I play it now? Here we go. So look, my opening intro is nowhere near as snazzy as what you and I do.
Got a 1990s lens flare.
Yeah. And so, I mean, look at how many queries there are in there, and forms and reports, and even a macro that the students have got to do. It was amazing, you know, and on there. So this is a video that students could access showing the similar but different tasks, saying this is how you would go about doing it. But look at that down at the bottom, 111 views. That wasn't very many, was it? When I look at your videos now.
Well, I do want to come on to this, Paul, okay? Because somebody mentioned that you're not a rival to us because you've only got 114 subscribers and you haven't uploaded a video in 6 years. So how could Paul Long possibly be a rival, you know, to Craig and Dave? And the truth is, to answer that particular question, we've just got to focus in different areas. I mean, you've got to focus on, you know, more recently creating what you call the ultimate GCSE resources that we'll look at in part 2. But you've been very focused on creating this, you know, deep e-textbook, if you like, for students and teachers. We've been focusing on creating videos on YouTube. So 2 very different kinds of products. But it doesn't mean that you're not creating worksheets and activities and other classroom resources, and we're creating worksheets and activities and other classroom resources. So when people try and compare us, they're not comparing like with like, in a sense. They're comparing, well, Craig and Dave, the YouTube channel, to Paul Long's YouTube channel. Well, that's not a fair comparison. Or Paul
comparing
Long's
apples to oranges.
Yeah. I was just thinking that, Craig. Yeah, it is. And you know, you guys do what you do, and I do what I do, and we've coexisted for a long time. And yeah, you know, some things have been frustrating. You know, I was like, oh, well, Craig and Dave already do these videos, and videos was the thing that I used to do, and I love doing videos. But you know, there's no point trying to do something where somebody's already in that space. You know, you find your own space. And you do around that. And in my speciality, I've always been doing model answers. So I carried on doing that sort of thing, and the textbook, which has been a mammoth task, you know, and all the link presentations and stuff. We're going to talk about that next time, aren't we? So, you know, but it is, yeah, it can be frustrating when you've got, you know, a rival, as we say, a competitor, doing the things that you want to do. But at the same time, you've got to get on with people and you've got to work with people. You know, we know lots of people in this space, Rob Heathcote, Sam, and others, who Nicola Wilkin and so on. It's you know, we none of us sort of like have arguments or anything. You know, we all coexist, don't we?
We do, and we do. We've mentioned this before, and we'll mention it again. We are friendly competitors. We're all trying to provide something different that is suitable for classroom, because there's no right way to teach, and therefore using different resources at different times is an appropriate approach. So it was, from my perspective, it was starting to get a bit frustrating, because we're both avid kind of readers and contributors to the many sort of Facebook groups and other places. And somebody would ask for, has anybody got a worksheet on binary addition, for example? And everyone piles in. Craig and Dave pile in with, are you a subscriber? Have you got our access to our resources? And Paul would chime in with, oh, you want to have the ultimate GCSE resources. And, you know, and other people would chime in. And we just kind of took a step back one day and said, what are we doing? You know, the moment that someone asks for something, we're almost at each other's necks. It's like, come on, surely we don't need to be like this. Wouldn't it be a far better place if over a period of time, and we're not there yet, but over a period of time, people had a genuine choice, but there was something very different that they were getting. And so the different sets of resources can actually talk and sing in harmony with each other, rather than directly trying to be better than each other. That's what we're trying to achieve there. So yeah. So Craig, do you want to talk about the informal partnership, what it means?
Well, this is where this really started, wasn't it? I mean, we'd been doing this for a little while, as you said, with other companies to a certain extent. We mentioned on a previous video that we don't try and see each other's competitors. You know, should we go ahead and write a textbook? Could we? Yes, but should we? What a waste of time. Paul's creating this detailed interactive one. PG Online are well known for writing textbooks. It'll be a waste of our time. So instead, we referenced textbooks that we use ourselves in our resources. In a similar vein, as Dave's just outlined, we got to the stage where we're like, well, actually, what Paul's got is very different to us. You mentioned earlier that someone previously commented, oh, Paul's not a competitor. His YouTube channel's nothing like yours. He's not a competitor in that space because Paul is not necessarily pushing the primary source for his resources and a flipped classroom approach. But we wouldn't bother touching this because Paul does it way better. And we thought, hang on a second. Why don't we just reach out to Paul? I mean, we know he's a decent bloke. Why don't we just see if we can make this work together? We're both trying to achieve the same aim, helping teachers, helping students. But if we just chatted a bit more, we could make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes. We could probably refine our resources better to, help serve the community. And actually, more's come out of this partnership than we originally planned, which is fantastic. So I think that's when we kind of reached out really to you, Paul, wasn't it? Like, could we have a little chat? And I do remember, I hope you don't mind me saying, I do remember the very first meeting being quite standoffish is not the right word, but we were quite careful and guarding our eggs, and you were being quite careful. So all businessmen don't want to give too much away. And after a few more calls, it became very. It's like, oh no, actually, yeah, these guys aren't looking to espionage my company.
No, I think we became comfortable with each other very quickly, didn't we? Yeah, it didn't take long, and we were. So, suddenly sharing company secrets and things, and it's I've absolutely loved working with you guys. It's just such great energy, to do that. And when I saw your first Unscripted video, I commented on it, didn't I? And I said, I want to do a guest spot with you, please. I want to do a guest spot. I absolutely loved watching it. And I've watched every single one of them. Yeah, I know. He's like, I live a boring life, really.
Yeah.
No. I do enjoy watching them, and I sometimes watch. I watched a couple of them in bed just before I go to sleep as well. And annoyingly, I haven't fallen asleep. Which got to be a credit to you guys, hasn't it? I obviously found it very interesting.
I don't think we're going to talk too much about the differences between the resources and stuff today, are we? We're probably going to touch on that in the next video. But I mean, people understand out there, Dave and I very much promote this flipped classroom approach. That's why we have the YouTube channel. And, Paul promotes a different style of pedagogical teaching. We've said this before, there's no right way to teach. There are different ways to achieve the same goals. And what we've achieved, I think what we'll hopefully explain really well in the next video, is actually, sure, you can buy our resource, you can buy Paul's, or you can buy someone else's, and that's fine. But you can also buy ours and Paul's resources, and they interlink really well. You can get benefit from both. You can pick and mix and match the approach. And that's something we've, I think, really tried to work on in this partnership. We're not actually, although we're at the same goal, we're doing it in different angles, and what works for one class and one student and one teacher might not work for the other. So actually, it's not a waste of money necessarily buying both. And I'd like to think we're very competitive on our prices. So
we'll explore that in the next video. But certainly, the point of this sort of informal partnership and where we move forward is to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes. Now, in the past, when we weren't talking to each other at all, and we were kind of just two separate entities and rival companies, we didn't know what Paul was working on. He didn't know what we were working on. And the chances were very high that we were going to produce essentially the same product and then try and both, sell it and compete in the same space. But moving forward, our intention is to have more heads up on what Paul's working on, and he'll have more heads up on what we're working on. And so we'll make sure that what we're creating is, synchronous and different,
complementary to
rather
each other,
than identical. And a good example of that is a few years ago, we created some informal walking, talking mock videos. And we just basically recorded a live session that we did with students. And it's something I've always wanted to come back to, because I'm not particularly happy with those recordings and I want to do them in a more professional way. However, we've recently learned that Paul is going to go and do some walking, talking mock videos. And therefore, we're going to back out of that space, not because we can't and couldn't do it. Of course we could, but we're just going to back out of that space. We're going to let Paul do it because he spends a lot of time working in schools on that area already anyway. And so it's an extension of what he does. Similarly, we're creating a great revision product called Smart Revise. And so Paul isn't going to go and create a web application that is about, multiple choice questioning and those sorts of things. Instead, what he's going to do is integrate his content into our platform. And so this is a great way that we can then work together.
Yeah, I'm a little bit behind on that as well. And that is my task for this afternoon, is to get you the first 10 questions over. So
okay.
Fantastic.
So, Paul, just to wrap it up then, let's tell people where they can find you. If they're interested in your resources, what can they do? If they're interested in you visiting their school for some CPD or whatever it is, a revision session, how do they get in touch with you? And, tell them how they can find out.
So the simplest thing is my website, and look, it's there anyway, paullong.net with the double L in the middle. And it is a little bit old at the moment, but Craig's other half is doing a brilliant job helping me to set up a new website. And when I get back from holiday, I'm going to Portugal. Yes. When I get back from holiday, I know I wasn't supposed to mention it, but when I get back, I'm going to be putting all of my energy back into that then and getting that up and running. So it's great thanks to you guys and also to Sam, in particular, for helping set that up. So there's something new coming in that space. And you can email me as well, paullong.net or paul@gcsecs.org. So there you go.
Craig will quickly type that out and we'll pop that into a banner. So thank you very much, Paul. Yeah, Craig and Dave in no way endorse international travel. Of course, this is Paul acting entirely independently and of his own free will. But
you should see the forms and paperwork and tests we've had to do. I need a holiday after all of that.
I know. Yes, welcome to the bizarrest period in our lives. Right. Okay. I tell you what, we'll leave it there. I'll get email addresses and everything, and we'll do another push in the next video and make sure that's all typed up and shown correctly. But look, brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. As I said, we haven't sacked Dave as much as I might like to occasionally, but yeah. More from you,
that's
Paul.
It. I know when I'm not wanted.
John, that's it.
Get back here, you plonker. Right, okay. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers.
It's been great.